Hey everyone, welcome back to Yuri's Box. In this video, I'm going to talk about, be answering out more questions from the comment section. And again, if you like this kind of content, consider leaving a like and subscribing to the channel. And as usual, nothing in this video is financial advice, of course. So this question comes from Vatsal Mehta. Hopefully I pronounced that and I didn't butcher it. And really the question is there a chance that perhaps we get a kind of a V-shaped recovery, something like we saw in COVID? So something that is definitely bit on the faster pace. So again, I think there are a few things to unpack here. So going into this, all right, first of all, in the a week ahead video I made yesterday, I was open to the potential for a bounce. I still believe that there could be a bounce. However, I mean, and again, the reason why I was open, and technically speaking, I'm still kind of open. You know, I'm not definitely betting I'm not betting the family farm on it. Again, I'm just open to the possibility that we might have a rally, a continuation of the rally, simply because in the short term, and I stress the short term, there could be some catch-up play to be had right here, because again, when nobody wants to own stocks and all of a sudden stocks go up, you know, this you can kind of get some FOMO back in, all right, into the equation. The problem that I see going forward, and the reason why I stress short term, and again, I'm not really banking on any kind of a rally, is because I'm in the camp that we will leave the tariff drama behind us. And now, again, I'll stress this as well. When I say that we will leave tariff drama behind us, I don't mean that tariffs will disappear, right? Because this is kind of the vibe that I get from looking at the S&P 500 and stocks. It's kind of acting as if tariffs have disappeared and dissipated. No. Tariffs are still there. They're still real. We still have to face a trade war. We still have to face, get down to making deals. We still have a lot to digest here. We still have to feel the effects from the tariffs. There's a lot to be digested there. When I say that we're leaving the tariff drama behind, I'm saying that we're probably going to be leaving behind the cardboard, all right? The crazy reciprocal tariffs. I'm not expecting more craziness, more, crazy tariff announcements like that. All right. Now, does that mean that we could have, again, Trump headlines saying, oh, China's terrible? Of course. And that is one of the reasons also why I wouldn't bank too much on rallies in this process, because I do believe it is a process. So, again, in the short term, we have a rally, yeah, but eventually we'll have to deal with reality. And reality is that the economy, okay, we'll have to deal with the fundamentals of the economy, however they are, all right? I'm definitely on the bearish side, all right? If you've been watching my videos, you'll know that. But I could easily be wrong. And the fundamentals of the economy could be rather strong, all right? Regardless of how they are, we'll have to go back to the economy, all right? So, like for TLT, we had, again, a nice move today. We're at 89.50. We're right smack in the middle of the bull market support band. Okay, we're in the process of potentially moving over, going over the bull market support band. But as I said in the weekly open video, what will matter is the jobs data. All right, if we're sitting at $91 at 7:30 a.m. on Friday, and the jobs data comes in great, like we have 300K, I mean, that will be all for nothing, right? As another user said, we take the elevator up and, just flush down immediately. The opposite could happen. We could be at, for whatever reason, at $88 at 7:30 a.m. Then we have the jobs report and it comes in terrible. We could be at, something like $94. I don't know. I'm just pulling numbers out of thin air right there, okay? So that is just to clarify how I'm really going into this week. Now, really honing into the second part of the question here. could we see some kind of a V-shaped recovery? All right, we get to the bounces, we get, whatever, and then we get to the correction. Could that correction be as sharp as it was during COVID? All right, and if you recall, this was COVID right here. All right, and the first thing I'll say to that, and again, I'm not speaking about the user in question. I'm not speaking to you that you specifically you that left the comment. Okay, I'm speaking to us collectively. Okay, COVID has distorted a lot of our perceptions of things, and I think it was kind of a series of distortions. Because, for example, I have talked about the 30-year bond and its price action in relation to what we have today. All right, the kind of move we saw at the beginning of the cycle. So let's say from 2020, right, move up, rally in bonds, sell off, first significant peak. Kind of a messy rally, but regardless. Then we have sideways action, first stop, W, shark pattern, whatever you want to call it. All right, you come up with the name of the animal. And that's kind of the move that we have right here, the W formation for now. And I've compared it before to 2006 and 2008. And again, we can look at, and again, I've said that it is a stretched out version of 2006 and 2008, all right? And reason is quite straightforward. You have the first move up, rally in bonds, a kind of a messy uptrend with a first significant top, sideways action, W pattern, shark pattern, whatever you want to call it. I mean, again, I'll leave that up to you. And, a few users have rightfully pointed out the fact that, it's not exactly the same. Like we had Bear Stearns right here, we had Lehman Brothers, we had a lot of things that, hopefully we don't get in the future. But regardless, we don't really have a lot of, the things that happened back then happen right now. And again, I don't have to I'm not trying to convince anyone that we're living through 2008. Again, I was going, whenever I spoke about this comparison, I always added that I was always expecting some kind of a deviation, which we got. Boy, did we get it. All right. But again, no cycle is identical. And the reason, what I try to point out when I talk about the comparison between today and 2008 is kind of the underlying kind of vibes that we had and we have today. And the biggest similarity that I find is with the inflation narrative. Because in 2008, we actually had inflation. We had a huge problem with inflation, as hard as it is to believe. In July of 2008, inflation was at 5.6%, and this is 2 months before Lehman Brothers. All right, and then we had deflation after that. What we have today is not exactly similar, but what we have today is what I call inflation PTSD. All right, and what do I mean by that? We are so afraid of a repeat of 2022, and you could, the way you can see this is every time we had this kind of a bounce right here, every news outlet would talk about 1970. All right, then would go down, everyone would go quiet. We go up, it's 1970 again. Disinflation, everybody goes quiet. Then we go back here, it's 1970, and now we're not really talking about it again. And again, all of this preamble, for why? First of all, to point out the fact that, again, there are possibly some similarities, but most importantly, this cycle is potentially similar to something like 2006, 2008, because of the consequence of COVID. Meaning that throughout the 2010s, we have gone through what you could call a malaise, a silent depression, whatever you want to call it. And the way you can visualize that is something like the quits rate. Quits rate is cycle high, the economy is doing great. You know how this goes. The quits rate goes down. People are less optimistic about the economy. All right, and again, we don't really have the chance to go back with the quits rate. Further back than the early 2000s. But what you get from here, right, from this cycle right here, just looking at what happened from 2003 to eventually 2009, is this boom and bust cycle. And this was quite normal, all right? Before 2008, you had this period of time where people would overdo it on the upside, right? And again, I'm just using the quits rate as, kind of a summary of everything, okay? And because they overdid it on the way up, we would have to face the music later on. From 2009 to 2020, we didn't really see a boom and a bust. It took us, again, until 2020, or really 2018, well, between 2018 and 2020, really, to get back at the levels we reached in September of 2005, right? So throughout this cycle, we didn't really have the chance to live through a boom and a bust cycle, right? It was kind of a slow recovery, a slow getting over 2008. COVID comes along, and we get locked up. We have a lot of money to spend, but we can't spend it. And when we can actually spend it, we go bananas, all right? So back here, whenever we had money, we would hoard it, basically. And again, I'm summarizing here. We would hoard it because we were afraid of having to face another 2008. Now we spend the money because who knows, maybe we'll get locked up again. We'll have to go into lockdown again. Maybe we won't be able to have those experiences. So you know what? I'm going to have them because I don't know what the future holds. And you have, the financial nihilism and, all of those, narratives associated with it. But what COVID caused, and this is my speculation, of course, is that it has caused us to break out of the malaise, of the 2010 malaise, and it has brought us back to something that is more consistent with 2008, 2006, and really what we saw prior to 2008. Boom and bust cycles. Now, boom and bust doesn't mean 1929 every few years. It just means that people overdo it on the way up. And, you don't have to overdo it by a lot, but, regardless of the entity, of the magnitude, you eventually have to face the music later on. And this is really, this goes back to answering, could we see a COVID-shaped, recovery? And to that, and I've said everything, this is kind of a long-winded question. I answer really. I apologize if I'm really being too long. But all of this to say is that, in my opinion, this cycle right here is more similar to something that is more akin to the pre-2008 world, where you saw boom and bust cycles. And whenever you saw boom and bust cycles, it wasn't a straightforward process, unlike COVID. I mean, COVID took February of 2020. We made the last high, and a month and a half later we bottomed. All right, and 3 months later we were basically nearly at all-time highs. It took us until a couple of months later. All right, so 5-6 months later to get back to all-time highs. What does a boom and bust cycle look like? All right. let's go again, just taking 2006, 2008 as an example. Again, I'm not saying that this is 2006 and 2008. I'm just, pointing out, a set of analogies, a set of similarities. What you saw in 2008, 2009 is that it took us quite a while to build out a bottom. We topped out in October of 07, and it actually took us 2 years to bottom out. Another way you can visualize this is by looking at initial jobless claims. And again, you know I'm not a fan of initial jobless claims. There's a lot of things you can say about them, but usually by the time initial jobless claims peak, that's the end of the recession. So it's not a leading indicator by any stretch of the imagination, at least I think. But what happened in 2006 and 2008, it took us a lot before, we actually broke out. All right, we were still on the downtrend. We bottomed out in 06, and we arguably broke out, let's say, right here in July of 08. All right, possibly, yeah, we started going on the uptrend, quite rapidly after March, really, of 08, after Bear Stearns. But regardless, it took us quite a while. All right, and they didn't top until March of 09, when exactly the stock market bottomed. If you look at what happened in COVID, this is COVID right here, it flattens everything else. We had initial jobless claims started to go up in the second week of March, and they topped out 30 days later, 20 days later. And after that, it was pretty straightforward. We bailed everybody out, QE, zero interest rate policy, all the good stuff, all the goodies. So I come back to one of the first things I said. Again, answering the question, could there be a V-shaped recovery? I lean more in the camp of us being in a pre-2008 style of boom and bust economy, simply because we've kind of been jolted out of the 2010s malaise, all right? So I would lean away from a sharp recovery. And I'll at this point, I will bring in another piece of the equation, which is the Fed. And again, COVID has distorted a lot of perceptions. All right, the way we perceive, the way we think about things like central banks. All right, because with COVID, everything happened fast, and we're used to a central bank that reacts quickly. All right, COVID comes. Immediately, you have QE, you have rate cuts, you have everything. You have extremely dovish FOMC members, all the good stuff, again. But that's not how central banks act. That is not the way they normally act. Normally, central banks are slow to react. And the key word here is react. Central banks don't anticipate anything. They don't try to act in a preemptive manner. They react to whatever it is they're getting slapped in the face by. All right. And the best way you can visualize this is by simply looking at the summary of economic projections. I've made a video. I've made videos quite a while back here, and probably the best one is June of 2024. Honestly, in June of 2024, we came from inflation being sticky. All right. Let's bring it up again so you can see it. So this was June right here. But by the time June came around, we had just gone through this move right here. And this move right here came at a great cost, because before, in the I think it was the November FOMC meeting, Powell hinted at the fact that we could have rate cuts next year, meaning 2024, if inflation was well behaved. Inflation was not well behaved. We had a series of higher reads in inflation, and because of that, the June summary of economic projections were, well, rather dot plot, it was quite hawkish. Right? If you look from March to June, we had, again, just focus on 2024. All these guys chilling between, 4.25 to 4.75. They take the elevator up. Meaning, at this point, the Fed was saying, remember all those rate cuts? No way, man. Higher for longer. Because we just had, these last few months that inflation's been extremely sticky. Yes, we're at 3% again, but this is where we were in last year, all right? This is where we were last year. So don't come asking us for rate cuts because we can't give them to you. Sure enough, we have further disinflation and a growth scare. And because of that, in September of 2024, in the Summary of Economic Projections, lo and behold, where are we? Right here. Everyone that was right here, all of a sudden, you know what? All of a sudden, those rate cuts don't sound too bad. And again, I could go on and on about this, but the point of it all is to say that in normal times, meaning even also a pre-2008 world, and even during the 2010s, arguably, now that, I could also say the same things about the 2010s. We always think that during the 2010s, the Fed outlawed recessions, and so we couldn't have a recession because we had QE. No, it's kind of the opposite. We had QE because we had no growth. The Fed was reacting. It wasn't preemptively acting preemptively against a recession. It was reacting to the lack of growth that's associated with the 2010s. Again, low GDP, low inflation, and again, a quits rate that just continued to struggle to get back to 2005 levels. Okay, so you have to think about the Fed being in a reactive manner. And in order for the Fed to deliver and QT, go to QE, rate cuts, it has to see pain. It has to see basically probably negative payrolls. I'll leave out the probably. All right. And so this continues to add, in my opinion, fuel to the idea that this cycle will most likely not be like COVID. Now, I'll further elaborate. I don't think we'll be in a COVID-like recovery, simply because the benefit of COVID is that everything hit fast and hard. All right, there wasn't really even a necessity to have any nuance or, have a second thoughts. The only thing that was correct and to do was just flood the market with liquidity. Is there a question of inflation or growth? No, it's growth. We're going to have to shut the economy off. we have to bail everyone out. The only thing you can do is ZIRP, zero interest rate policy, QE, just everything. And it is during this time frame where you had actually Neel Kashkari say the famous phrase, there is an infinite amount of cash in the Federal Reserve, all right? That's how bad things were. There wasn't a question of, should we consider inflation? No, it was just growth. In 2008, just like today, if you go back even to July of 2008, all right, when we had, a 24, 25% drawdown from the top, even here we had similar articles, similar rhetoric in regards to inflation, meaning because we had inflation, again, right here, be at highs that we hadn't seen in quite a while, actually, since the 1990s, right here, you still had articles. And again, I suggest you just Google it, look up, Wall Street Journal, Financial Times, what they were saying about inflation in July of 2008. You'll see that just like today, a lot of people were yelling and arguing for rate hikes because we had this huge inflation problem, right? And again, back then they had inflation. Right now, we have inflation PTSD. We are so afraid of the fact that 2022 might come back that we're just getting tunnel vision because of inflation. And again, I could definitely be wrong about this. We could definitely be in the 1970s. But so far, we have a worsening growth outlook, just like we had in 2008. And just like 2008, we have this uneasy feeling about inflation. Again, back then they had inflation. Now we have the fear of inflation coming back. But as, the narrative goes, still to this day, we still have people arguing for higher for longer, and, the inflation fight is not over. And again, I'm not here to convince the other side. I'm just here to point my, to give you my opinion, really. And again, I could easily be wrong, but again, that'll be a, time will tell, all right, who is right or wrong. So again, this is a really long video, probably longer than it should have been. But to summarize, I don't think this will be a COVID-like recovery because of COVID, we have actually catapulted ourselves out of 2010's malaise, and we're back to something that is more similar with the pre-2008 world, meaning we have booms and busts, all right? And because you have booms and busts, you actually have to deal with growth and inflation, just like you had in 2008, all right? Yes, growth was slowing down, but inflation was going up, all right? Right here, yes, inflation is kind of going down, but it's not going down as fast as we wanted it to go. You have a worsening growth outlook, all right? Not in depression, not in recession, but a slowdown. But you have to consider both things, all right? During COVID, no, you didn't have to consider both things. The only thing you had to do was flood everything because inflation was never going to be a problem if the economy was effectively dead. And so again, what made the V-shaped recovery possible, in my opinion, was also the fact that it was just about growth. You didn't have this, lead up where the Fed is kind of like, and everybody else is kind of dragging their feet about, but do we have to consider inflation or growth, inflation, growth? And, you have people like me arguing again, that we should be cutting in this environment because we still have the chance to cut and we should stimulate growth. But you have other people that are arguing against that, and they're arguing that, we might get 2022 again. And again, it's this push and pull between the growth side of the equation and the inflation side of the equation that actually eventually perhaps leads us to the bust. All right, it's this kind of is it growth, is it inflation, is it growth, that is inflation. It might end up being growth, just like it ended up being in 2008. And we'll just be late and we'll have to do more than we would have otherwise. And eventually it'll just take us longer. Right? It took us 2 years to bottom. I don't absolutely know how long it'll take us to bottom. But overall, I would expect a long process, as I've been arguing for so far. This won't be if it is a bear market, if it is indeed a bear market, I would expect this to play out at least until the summer. Again, even before the tariff drama, I've been in the camp that the summertime will be the judge of where we eventually go. All right, whether we have a soft landing, a hard landing, or if we have a landing at all. All right. So hopefully that that answers your question. Overall, personally, I'm in the camp, if you haven't watched my previous videos, that we should be safeguarding growth. And simply because, again, just to add something else, rate cuts and rate hikes do not act immediately. I mean, you don't feel the effects immediately. They act with a lag. Whenever you're setting monetary policy, and again, I'm just a schmuck with a YouTube video. All right, I don't have a seat on the FOMC. I could definitely be wrong, absolutely. But the way I look at these things, my humble opinion is that it takes time. It takes time for rate hikes to be felt, and it takes time for rate cuts to be felt. And I'll finish off by saying that, as I've said many, many times, my bullish thesis could be called into question if we see some huge stimulus package. Because again, the conditions that we're seeing right now aren't too dissimilar from what we saw in COVID, because arguably supply chains are going to be strained in the coming months. If in the lead up to that we don't see stimulus packages, then that I'll maintain my bullish outlook. If in the meantime we get huge stimulus, like stimmy checks and the like, then I would have to look back on the and the bullish on the bullishness on bonds. But again, I'll stop right here. And again, just to summarize, we're likely to be, in my opinion, in the boom and bust cycle. We've broken out of the 2010 malaise, low inflation and low growth of the 2010s. And that just means that it'll be a process. If it is indeed, the end of the cycle, if it is a bear market that has begun as of February 18th, it'll take time to bottom out. All right. And it won't be fast. It won't be fast as many of us would like we saw in the COVID crash, simply because you have to consider both things now. It's not a matter of just growth. You have to consider inflation and growth. And you have to kind of juggle both things, or at least the Fed has to. And that is what probably will lead it to, as it always did in the past, to drag its feet and be too late, as Trump said, called him Mr. Too Late. Again, hopefully this answered your question. If you enjoy this kind of content, consider leaving a like and subscribing to the channel. And I'll see you next time. Bye.